as an announcement, and then we'll start with Martin's talk.
Hey guys, I need your attention just for a minute, please. Little housekeeping thing. They blocked us in, okay, so that when I leave, I don't have to key the building. So when we leave, the doors close behind you. They do not open again, all right? So they've gone for the day. So if you go out any door and it closes behind you, do not expect it to open again, unless you have someone on the other side that you like, or that likes you.
That's more important.
That sounds challenging.
So, can the people outside hear you right now?
Don't go outside without a treat to lure someone to come open the door for you, because it will close. We're trying to prop some things open there, okay? So, but just be aware that if you go out towards smoke or something like that, that door closes, you're at our mercy. Okay? Thank you. Oh, he also mentioned that CPEs are at the end of this table at the very back. On this row, the last table, please sign up if you need your CPEs.
All right, so we're going to start with Martin's talk on the service. I just lost my train of thought. The scripting. Yeah, the scripting stuff. Scripting, not service version.
All right. I mean, I can talk real loud. I don't care.
Talking loud is good because that gets it better on camera.
Very good.
All right, we're starting back up.
Here we go.
Awesome. All right, guys, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Nmap scripting engine and a couple other cool things that Nmap does. I like to call this the stuff they don't teach you in the CEH class. Oops. So, my name's Martin. My name's Pure Hate on the Twitters. And if you don't get this joke, I don't know what to tell you. So, anyway, so I love Nmap. There's several reasons. The primary one is because Trinity uses Nmap, right? So the other reason is I am a professional penetration tester. I do red team, black box engagements, that type of thing. And so nowadays, the days of like going into a network and turning on Nexpose and Nmap and running full blast are quickly coming to a close, right? People aren't interested in that type of thing. People are interested in checking whether the millions of dollars they spent on their security devices are working. So more and more when you come into networks, you know, no longer are you getting whitelisted. No longer, they want to check their detection. They want to see at what threshold they can catch you. So I don't know if you use Nessus or Nespose or any of that stuff, but as soon as you hit go, it lights up everything in a network like a Christmas tree, and they all know that you're there. So what's the solution for that? Nmap. So I'm going to take a lot of information from this book. Some of it I've shamelessly stolen. No, I do give credit at the end for everything. But if you want to use Nmap to its fullest potential, you have got to have this book. It's actually written by the dude that wrote Nmap, and it's awesome.
It is awesome.
Also, I probably curse a lot. I'm just going to apologize in advance. I'm not safe for work at all. So, anyway. So here's the three things I'm going to cover, hopefully really quickly. The Nmap scripting engine, then I'm going to talk about Metasploit integration, and then we're going to talk about AB evasion. All right, so the Nmap scripting is the most powerful and flexible feature of Nmap. It's what bridged the gap between making Nmap a port scanner into making it an actual pen testing tool. Basically, the coolest part about it is that it's written in the Lua programming language, which is really, really simple. I mean, like, you have to be a total idiot not to be able to understand. It's really simply laid out, and the reason I think that they chose that is so that it was going to be really easy for users to write, share simple scripts. Basically, it's got several cool things. It can execute the scripts in parallel. It's really, really fast, and you can write scripts all day long to meet your custom needs. You know, like, I don't know if anybody here is a pen tester, but even like on a network thing where you like get to work and you got to write some bash script or whatever to do one simple thing, and then you write it, and then you throw it away, and 2 weeks later you have to do it again, and you're like, what did I do with that piece of code that I wrote? Well, This is the perfect reason to use like an Nmap script, is to write some code to do that, file it away. I have a whole directory of custom scripts. They're basically one-off tools. They're not designed to run an entire vulnerability scan. They're designed to do one specific thing. So there's a couple of tasks that they had in mind, and this is important to understand for when you're writing a script, because all of these scripts fit in default categories, so to speak. The main thing that they looked at was better network discovery. I'm not gonna just read off the thing, but more sophisticated version detection. There's several services. Skype version 2 is one of the main ones that can't be detected very well by Nmap's normal version detection. Then vulnerability detection was gonna be a big one. I don't know if anybody's ever, and we're gonna look at a ton of scripts. I don't have the like VMs and resources to run them all, so I mean we're just going to look at them on a slide. A lot of them will work against the Metasploitable VM if Adrian can get that rocking. So if anybody wants to try.
Actually, I think it is out there, but you may have to connect to the Nmap target's network.
All right, there you
This
have
network
it.
is having issues now.
So the main things, so these two things are the main things that I use the Nmap thing for. One is the vulnerability detection. The second one is the backdoor detection. Has anybody ever heard of Heartbleed? Anyway, it was this really small SSL bug that happened a little while ago.
What is it, Martin?
And what was really cool about Heartbleed is that first there was this really shitty like Python code that came out on the internet to check for it, and like, I don't know, but I don't run Python code from Pastebin on my network. However, what did happen was immediately following that, somebody created an Nmap script to check for Heartbleed that was written in the Lua programming language, and it was immediately committed to the Nmap tree. So what that allowed people to do was to look for Heartbleed safely on their network without running some sketchy code from Pastebin. So really cool for backdoor detection. Like, it's also like, I help a lot of network admins on tests and stuff that I do, like write a quick script to find something specific on their network, right? It's a one-off type thing. The other thing is, of course, vulnerability detection. I know nobody here could possibly have MS0867 on their network. I know. However, I find it on everyone's network when I get in there, so there's a great script for that. Then they can do some vulnerability exploitation. I feel it's a little bit limited in that category. However, it is coming around. And so the reason for this is I've been on several tests where I go into a network and they're like, you're not putting your computer on our network. And I'll be like, but wait, I was here to test. And they're like, yep, you're going to use our computer. And then I'm say, all right, cool. And then they say, oh, and you can't install anything, but here's Nmap. So that's happened before. It's a true story. And then I've spent 2 weeks with Nmap and like, you know, a mouse trying to own a network. And so it can be done, and it's really tedious, but we're going to talk about how it can be done, because if you truly want to fly under the radar, you have to understand how to learn some of this stuff. So there's some script categories. I'll just go through these real quick. They're pretty self-explanatory. The authentication ones look for, you know, logging in on a target system, SMB login, telnet, blah, blah, blah. Broadcast. So broadcast is really cool for, and I'll come back to this, is for looking for what network you're actually on. Broadcast is actually really cool for IPv6 stuff too. Default. So you saw back when Adrian did the -SC or whatever, that means run all the default scripts in the category. So if you write a script and you call it default, it's getting run every time in the default category. Discovery. Basically like looking for these services on non-standard ports, mapping back against public registries. It does a lot of that kind of stuff. Denial of service does exactly what it fucking says. Crashes the service. Those are not really good for anything, but you know, whatever. So exploit ones, they try to exploit a vulnerability. There's some external ones. The reason they call them external is because it does send data to a third party from inside the network, so it might send it to ARIC or Whois or one of those. So just be aware of that. There's fuzzers. If anybody doesn't know what a fuzzer is, it's basically how people find exploit code. You send a whole bunch of random data to an input field that it's not expecting, hoping for the service to crash. So there's scripts for that. There's intrusive ones. So for example, the MS-08671 is considered intrusive because it can crash the Windows RPC service. So they call those intrusive. For me, they're not intrusive, but whatever, but so some people. Then there's safe scripts, there's version scripts, and then there's vulnerability scripts. So basically any script you use will fit into one of these categories. And so we'll look at the header of a script, but when you're writing a script, in order to be in the correct Nmap format, you have to fall into one of these categories. All right, so there's actually not a ton of command line arguments. It's not quite as confusing as Nmap as a whole. So basically SC, we already talked about this a little bit, it runs all of the default scripts. The next thing is this, if you want to run individual scripts, you just do -- script. You can run them by file name, you can run them by category, and you can also run them by a directory. So remember how I said I have a totally separate directory with my custom scripts in it? I can just give it that directory. Script arguments. So a lot of the scripts take arguments like username, password, like whatever. I'm not going to go into them. We'll look at a couple examples, but that's how you run arguments. You can also put your script arguments into a file if you're going to use them over and over and over and over again. Script help, you know, RTFM. It's probably the most important command you'll see here. Basically, you can hit script help, give it the name, and it will show you the help. Imagine that. Be surprised how many people don't understand that part. Script trace is basically for if you're actually writing a script. What it does is if you run script trace, it will not just give you the fancy output, it will give you every single command of what the script is doing. So that's how you would debug your script to see if it's not working correctly, it's not calling the right variable, totally broken. Theoretically, that would tell you at what point of the script it was breaking. And then script update database. So all of the scripts in Nmap are in a database. So basically you put it in the folder and we'll take a look there, but just putting it in the folder isn't good enough. You actually have to update the database afterwards so that Nmap knows that it's there. All right, so here's a couple of more key points about scripting. Script output is only written to the XML output. It doesn't come out in there. So remember how Jeremy was just talking about the 3 types of files that Nmap puts out, a greppable, a human readable, and an XML. So that script output only comes out in the XML. If you give it the SV option, remember they were talking about the SV option for service scanning, that actually runs a bunch of scripts by default already. So they're all safe scripts. They're not anything that's going to crash your network or anything like that. And if you give it the -A flag, remember they were talking about that earlier, the aggressive option, that automatically implies the -C. So that automatically runs all of the default scripts already. So a lot of people don't know those couple of things, but thought it was important. So I want to talk a little bit about my methodology for using some of this stuff. So like I said, a lot of times we want to fly under the radar. We like to call them ring the bell exercises. So basically what we do is come in Monday morning on a network. We don't get whitelisted. Nobody knows we're there, any of that kind of stuff. And we start out plugging into the network and just seeing where we can go. Nobody gives us a list of IPs. Nobody gives us really anything. So this is the way that we like to pen test, right? So then we keep log files of everything that we're doing. And then at some point during the week, hopefully, somebody notices what we were doing, right? Wednesday at like 11 o'clock. Then I can go back through all my log files and I can say, oh, well, we were doing this, this, and this, and you didn't catch us, but as soon as we did this, you did catch us. So now we know where the threshold of your monitoring software is and where we need to tune it up. So basically, when I come into a network, I like to create subnet lists right off the bat. Obviously, I'll look at ifconfig. That's my first /24. The next thing I do is look in the etcresolve.conf. That's my second /24, because what are those? The DNS servers. If you're not familiar with Linux, that's where the DNS server IPs are. Basically, 9 times out of 10, an organization puts their DNS servers in the same /24 as their domain controller.
Oh, wait. I want to apologize for the first 14 minutes of your talk. I had the Nmap logo and the Hackers for Charity logo all over your face and everything.
Whatever.
It's continuing. But,
It's probably better than my face, to be honest.
The network's back up, by the way.
All right. Awesome. So now you're at my real face. So fun. Anyway, so where was that? Oh, so the etsyresolve.com, that's the best place to look for server arrangements, right? Because generally when you come into an organization, you're going to plug into a desktop range. Where do I want to get to? The server range. So who doesn't have their DNS server in the same /24 as their domain controller? One dude. Awesome. So, cool. The next thing we can do is hit net discover. I don't know if anybody knows about it, but it's just a little command line tool. It should be in Kali. It basically works on ARP requests. And it basically sends out a bunch of ARPs and says who's there. You can get some data that way. Wireshark, obviously, you can passively listen. You can open up the packets and just see where they're from and where they're going. That'll give you a bunch more /24s. And then, if you're not a total idiot, when you walked in the organization, you probably saw their name on the door, and I can guarantee you that their domain is probably companyname.com or companyname.local. There's not a lot of choices. People are not real original. So you can do a dig lookup against the domain controller and get. So basically what that does is that usually gives me several /16s to get started with, right? So then the next thing I do is like Adrian was talking about, is I do a ping SP with the PI because it does not make a full connection. So it rarely sets off IDS scanners. So I do that and I create a host list of the entire network. /16 by /16 usually. So the next thing that I do is take the host list, and what I want to do is make, and this is just me personally, I'm just sharing a little bit of my methodology, and it takes a little bit longer, but what I like to do is I like to make a separate file for every port that I'm going to be interested in. So, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in the IDS section, but just in case we don't get to it, almost every IDS or IPS or any of those monitoring tools that I've ever encountered have a threshold of 5 ports, so they alert on scans of 5 ports or more. So if you scan 1 port at a time, never going to see you. The other trick to that is to randomize your IP list. So another thing that IDSs do is they look for sequential scanning of IPs like .1, .2, .3, .4. So, and once again, I have that in later slides. So Nmap has a little bitty command in there to mix those up. However, I'm not always entirely trustful of that, so I like to use the sort R. So sort-capital R is randomize the list, right? So anyway, so like you can see here in my example that I got my host list. I'm randomizing it. I'm putting it through Nmap. I'm using a SYN scan because that's usually the most stealthy. I'm only looking for port 389, which is LDAP, right? So I'm looking for servers. And then I'm only outputting it to a greppable file. And then this little hyphen basically means, so IL is your host list, and then a hyphen means to use standard in for Nmap. So basically I would keep doing, oh shit, whoops. Uh-oh. How do you go back?
Use your arrows, use left arrow.
Oh, that's right. Oh, there we go. Oh well. Sorry, I suck at PowerPoint. That's another disclaimer. Anyway, and I started this at 11 o'clock last night. Anyway, so what I like to do is I have sort of in my head like the top 10 or 20 ports that I'm really interested in. I'll be constantly doing this on the side throughout the entire engagement for less standard ports. But, so here's like a typical scan that I would do, and I'm going to explain. I mean, I have like 20 of these we're going to look at, but so basically like here is a FTP scan. So obviously I only want open ports. N means not to do any DNS resolution. Did you cover that, Adrian? Probably did. Anyway, so
yeah,
it is a
meant
little bit
very
faster
briefly
because it doesn't try to look up the domain name. It only cares about the IP. Because I only care about IPs usually. And then so the script, so these particular scripts are looking for FTP anonymous login, because nobody has that, right? And then the FTP bounce attack, which, remember how Adrian was talking about the decoy scans and the things like that? That's what we can use the FTP bounce for. And then you'll see I'm giving it my list 21.txt. So I'm flying under the radar because I'm only looking for IPs that came up with port 21 open, and I'm still only scanning one port at a time. And depending on what I was doing, I would probably add some more of the commands that we're going to talk about later.
What is the libOE?
I'm going to have to look it up. Because I have a lot of these pre-done out, like I do them all the time. I'll have to look up what exactly that is. It's entirely possible I spelled it wrong too. We'll look it up in 1 sec, actually.
It's his library of pi.
All right, so sounds cool, right? So anyway, we already looked at this, but I'm just talking about Kali. So in Kali, the scripts are in USR, share, Nmap scripts, right? If you're using like Ubuntu, it's the same except it's local. So if you're using Windows, I don't know where they are. So you'll have to find them yourself. Basically, there's hundreds of scripts in the directory. I mean, I find new ones all the time, and I've been doing this stuff for a really long time. They all have a .nse, and they're all in that directory. So that's how you find them. Very, very important. Do not run a script against your network if you have no idea what it does. Say I didn't warn you. So there's a couple of ways that you can research what a script does. One of them, surprisingly enough, is the nmap.org website. So they have a whole thing with all of their scripts in here. And you can go through and just click on whatever it is that you want. And it gives you all kinds of cool stuff. So basically it tells you what type it is, the category it falls into, where you can download it, the summary. And then this is the most important part, is the script's arguments, because the actual script output when you run it is not very verbose. So a lot of times you got to figure out the arguments ahead of time so that you know what they're going to be. Then it gives you example usage and example output. So researching the script this way, there's not really any way you can go wrong. Well, I'll take that back.
Never underestimate a sufficiently talented idiot, right?
Hey, can you go back 2 slides?
2 slides. Somehow I got this all messed up. Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Hold on. Sorry. I'm working on it. There.
you go. Oh.
This?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I tried to make it as big as I could, but
That's perfect. Okay, they should have given us a whiteboard so you could write it down.
and I'll give this stuff to Adrian. Like, I'm sure he'll put this on his website somewhere, maybe. It'll be a PDF though, so use it at your own risk. Anyway.
As long as it's not a .pdf.text, I'm okay.
All right, everybody good with that page? Yep. All right, cool. So there's our info. All right, so now let's go over my favorite scripts. I would love to talk about every script in the directory, but 1, I don't know what they all are, and 2, we'd be here till Wednesday. So these are the ones that I use the most of the time, right? So I'm just going to go over, I got a couple of these so we can just go over them. I just want everybody to get the syntax correct of looking for these, right? So there's 2 ways that you can search for Nmap scripts, right? The first one is script help. Remember we talked about script help? And so you can basically give it FTP dash and then the star, and that basically says, give me all the information about any of the scripts that start with FTP in the directory. The only reason I don't do that is sometimes the output is a little bit too verbose for me because it gives you like a blurb about every single script. Like I can show you, for example, maybe. So see how like this is a little bit more verbose than I really want? So because it gives you the categories. Can everybody see this? Is it big enough? Yeah. All right, cool. So it gives you the categories, but guess what? We're going to find out what that one script does now. So that's so this was a exploit. This where is it? This vulnerability exploit. So it checks for that. So anyway, this is good if you're not super familiar with what the scripts do. But I'm usually in a hurry, so I just go into the directory like this. So much harder to type when you're standing in front of a bunch of people. So I'm lazy and I like to do it like this.
We're only half choices.
So this is the way that I would look. The unfortunate part about this is that you get some TFTP bullshit, but whatever. Anyway, so then at the bottom I got a little example of how we're going to do this script, right? And so scan delay. This is all stuff at the end, but whatever. I don't know how to put that in there. Scan delay, another great evasion technique, right? So it's a delay in between every single packet that Nmap sends. It's much, much, much better for evasion than setting the timing. However, it can be dreadfully slow. However, if that's what your, if that's what your charter is on the test, then that's what you got to do. Another one is spoofing the source port. I don't know that anybody went over this yet, but spoofing the source port can be really, really good for getting around firewalls. Does anybody know what port 53 does?
Yes.
All right, so guess what the most common port to get let through a firewall is? Yeah, awesome. So I love to use port 53. It almost always goes through a firewall. Internally, there's some other ports I like to use, but externally, that's 53. You'll see here, once again, I'm using my 21.txt. I'm using my PN, no DNS resolution, SYN-SCAN. I only want the open ports. And then I'm running a couple of scripts, right? I want the banner, I want FTP login, and I'm looking for an FTP bounce in case I got a decoy in my attack. So that's FTP. Sorry. Yep.
So how do you protect against this? So I'm a system administrator, I need to shut you down, I'm going to do this. You're spoofing the port. How do I figure that out?
I mean, to be honest with you, it's going to be really hard to shut down somebody that knows how to use Nmap. I mean, you're better off attacking that from the perspective of having somebody on your network that knows how to use it just as good, that can protect against all of these other issues, right? I mean, you're never going to stop the attacker, right? You're only going to stop what they can do on the network. So, I mean, if you have somebody that has enough time to search, one port by one port, and do this, I don't know. There are, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but there are some several IDSs and IPSs that can detect the Nmap signature. Nmap has a distinct data packet signature, so you can go that route. There is, of course, a way around it. There always is, but and so that's over in my evasion part or whatever. But there are some ways to do that. If you have a SIM, you can see Nmap scans and that kind of thing, but. For me personally, the better thing would be making sure you don't have any anonymous FTP on the network, for example. So, hopefully everyone can see this, but sorry, I had to blur out the IPs. But I was looking for pictures of some of this stuff working, and unfortunately I can only find it in some old stuff. But anyway, you can see how bad anonymous FTP login can be, because look, so I got in this. There's a bin directory that symlinks to the real USR bin directory, so now I've got binaries and all this kind of stuff. So that kind of thing's out there on the internet all over the place, I promise.
So is that actually pulled out from your script? So it's actually putting that information into the output based on your script, or did you actually connect to that?
No. So the FTP anonymous login, once it logs in anonymously, it's going to do an LS on the directory where it was able to log into. Yeah, so you don't actually have to connect. You can just go and look through, whatever. Because we all know public's not very interesting, right? That's the company's public directory. There's probably nothing in there. However, Etsy's probably really interesting because that's where the Etsy password file is, just for example. I'm not saying it's there. I'm just saying that. That might be a good clue. Anyway.
I guess it would also matter as to what user was running the FTP server, as to what it has access to.
Right, absolutely. I mean, you might still run into a situation where just because I can log in anonymously doesn't mean I have access to any of these folders, right? I mean,
files inside. Yeah.
the main thing, I mean, into pen testing, the main thing I'm looking for pen testing with anonymous root login is for it to be in the root of a web server, because that's normally what people do, right? They stand up a web server and then they have an FTP anonymous so that you can upload like pictures or files or whatever. I want to be able to get a shell into that directory, and then I want to be able to, like a web shell, and then I want to be able to browse to it via the web. Because you can't execute anything from FTP, however you can generally write to the files. So that's the type of thing that we're looking for as pen testers that way.
Although it helps that it outputs all the permissions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, super helpful.
Yeah.
So I don't have a picture for all of them, but I just tried to get a picture for some of them so you can see what the scripts exactly do, because like I said, I couldn't set anything up that was able to do all of these. SSH. So this is another one that, we like to look for. I'm not going to go over this search stuff every time, but I just put it on there for each one so that you can see all the different SSH scripts, right? So there's also an SSH brute force script. It's not very fast and it kind of sucks, but I don't know why it didn't come up in the grep. But there's several better tools for brute forcing SSH. What we're really looking for SSH is usually like SSH v1 or something along those lines. So once again, you can see the command. It's basically the same. I'm just calling the scripts that I want. I've got all of my, different flags and stuff in there. Not really rocket science. This is an awesome one. So SMTP is super awesome because what can you do with that? Send social engineering emails, right? So this is one of the very first things that I'll look for when I go into an organization is an SMTP server. As soon as I plug in, I start looking for these because generally they don't validate against their Active Directory. So I can send an email from anybody in the company to anybody in the company, and it will be legitimate because it never leaves the domain. So I'm always looking for one of these. Oh, looks like I got the command wrong at the bottom. Shit, sorry. Told you I suck at PowerPoint, I'm sorry. But anyway, basically the main one that you would use is SMTP Open Relay. That's the one that we're looking for the most. And I think, I guess I didn't have a picture for that. Whoops. So DNS. DNS always gets a bad rap because everybody thinks it's stupid, right? Well, there has been some stuff you used to be able to do with it. You used to do zone transfers, and there was that Kaminsky thing or whatever. But anyway, there's one other thing that we use DNS for that a lot of people don't think about. Do I have a picture for that? Oh, yeah. So, can everybody see that? Anyway, so cache domains. So DNS servers love to cache domains. So Nmap has a script called DNS cache snoop. And so basically what it does is it has 100 domains in the cache snoop script. And they're dumb. They're like Wikipedia, Facebook, YouTube, all the normal ones. But what this tells me is that I ran the script against there, and it tells me that one of the 100 tested domains are cached, right? Wikipedia.org. Big deal. However, what if I had a list of all of the AV update vendor URLs? Not saying I do, but what if I did? Then what I could do is I could specify that list, and I could run this again, and I could find out which AV vendor you are using because the update URL is going to be cached in your DNS server. And now when I send you a social engineering attack, I've targeted specifically to bypass your AV. So that's a way that you use a script like that. DHCP. I only put this in there because remember when we went back and we were talking about all of the ways that I find IPs on the network? So you can do the DHCP discover. Do something for that. You can do the DHCP discover, and it will tell you all of this information without even doing anything, right? It will tell you where you got your IP, the server that gave it to you, the subnet mask, the domain name. Now, if I would have done this in a real Active Directory environment, it also would have given me domain names and all kinds of other information. It's also useful for IPv6 discovery, but that's sort of out of scope here. It's more complicated. We'll do it on time. Oh well. All right, so here's a thorn in everybody's side, Microsoft SQL. So these scripts are awesome for finding this stuff, right? So basically, like, there's a ton of other SQL scripts. Like, I think that I had to truncate this a little bit to fit on the screen. But this is where you get a little bit more complicated, right? I did this to show some script arguments. So basically, I'm going for SQL info. Then I'm going for Microsoft SQL is going to check for a blank SA password, because nobody's ever had one of those before, right? Yeah, I didn't think so. So then it's going to do this SQL tables, so it's going to try to dump the tables. And then it has some script arguments, right? There's an example of using a username and a password, SA, and you would just put that to whatever you found out what it was. And then it has the hash database access. Now, obviously, these you need a username and a password for to get the full effect or whatever. However, you'll notice at the bottom you can also enable the XP command shell just with an Nmap script, which is how people get owned with SQL injection. So NFS shares, and this should work against that Metasploitable VM. I think it's got some open NFS shares, but people blow over this all the time. I'll put this on reports all the time, and they're always like, who cares, NFS is dumb. But that's not the case, right? Because it's really just like a Windows file share. It's a share out there on the internet that can be connected to by anybody. So I'll look for this all of the time. So NFS show mount will basically show you all of the NFS stuff. So if anybody knows where that Metasploitable VM is, I mean, I'm not on that network, but you would just do, show mount E and then the IP of the Metasploitable VM, and it would list all of the NFS shares. And that's basically the same thing that the script is doing. And so why is that dangerous? Because if you'll notice, here I've mounted somebody's NFS share, and then when you go down here, oh my God, what do they have? Their entire Server 2003, Server 2008 gold disk images for their entire company on a file share. So what did I do? Well, I just downloaded one and installed it and pulled the admin password hash out of it, and that was all she wrote. So this is why it's important to protect your NFS shares. All of this found with Nmap, before I even used a vulnerability scanner. It's the important part I'm getting at, I guess. NetBIOS. This isn't particularly useful, so we're going to skip over it really quick. The one reason that I use this is because I do lots and lots of NBNS spoofing on networks. It's kind of a big deal right now. It's an easy win. So this is a really quick test to see if NetBIOS over TCP is turned on the network, even though I can just run the tool, but this is fancier. So SMB, this is everybody's favorite, right? And these are all just examples of all the ways that I use these scripts, right? I mean, like, I haven't even used a vulnerability scanner yet on the network. I don't really care for them. I'd much rather do it this way. So whenever I put 3 dots down here, that means there's a shitload more scripts, and I just couldn't fit them on the screen. But anyway, there's tons of them for SMB, but there's SMB login and new processes, sessions, shares, all of that information that you need to get from SMB services, right? Because usernames, passwords, shares, everybody knows. The important one that we usually use is SMB check bones because it checks for MS0867. So you can see here, unfortunately this was not vulnerable. It's the only picture I could find. But anyway, when you run that script, it looks like this, right? And so it would say vulnerable if it was vulnerable. The reason that I like this is because it's usually less likely to crash the service than some gigantic vulnerability scanner. Also, I like to scan for one thing at a time because it's easier and I have ADD. Anyway, so web. Now this is where the scripts get really kind of complicated. So I like to group all of the web ones together. They don't all fit in just grepping for HTTP because you can see there's some Citrix ones, there's some VMware ones, there's a couple of other ones, but basically, and if you'll notice, I'm still under 5 ports, right? I'm at 5 ports, I'm at the threshold or whatever. Now, some people could have changed their IDSs to alert on 1 port or 2 port, but that hasn't been my experience out in the real world. Some important scripts here. I mean, there's tons more. Like I said, I can't fit them on the screen, but cold fusion. Does anybody know all the issues with cold fusion? Yeah, it's awesome. I like it. Anyway, there's all kinds of scripts here that can do authentication tests. For me, these are really, really helpful in fingerprinting web apps before I do any further testing against them. So that's why I have this big, giant jumble of scripts here. These are all safe. A lot of them are in the default category. Has anybody ever looked at Adrian's robot.txt file? Yeah. Check it out. It's awesome. So all that will come up out of this script. This produces quite a bit of output. SNMP, not going to go over it. Everybody knows what SNMP is, but basically most of this stuff looks for information or public-private strings. LDAP. I'm always looking for LDAP on the network because unfortunately we always go after Windows first, right? So here's the stuff that I use to locate LDAP servers as quickly as possible. How many more of these do I have? Anyway, so I think we're getting to something else in a minute, I swear. So SSL, once again, I mean, this is only cool because of Heartbleed, otherwise I wouldn't have even mentioned it. But there's the Heartbleed script. There are some other SSL scripts here. The only time these are important is if your organization has anything to do with PCI, they start giving you a super hard time about SSL v2. So a lot of times we use these scripts to validate. The other way that these scripts are used, that can be used in a network setting, is if you do have a vulnerability scanner like Nessus or Nexpose or Koalas or some thing like that, and you run it, every week or whatever against your organization, everybody knows that 3/4 of it is false positives, right? And so what happens is you get this gigantic wave of information, and nobody fixes anything because it's mostly bullshit. So these scripts can be a really, really, really good secondary check for anything that comes out of a vulnerability scanner. So basically, you run Nexpose, it comes up and it says you have all these, Microsoft SQL blank SA passwords. You take them over to the SA dudes, and they're like, "You're fucking crazy. This thing is wrong." And you're like, "All right." You go back to your desk and you run one of these Nmap scripts, and you see that it logs in SA with a packet trace. And then you take it back down there, and you're like, "No, look, fix it." So really good for secondary checks. Here's an example of Heartbleed. Has anybody ever heard of Heartbleed? So if you do run the script for Heartbleed, this is what it'll look like. Vulnerable. I like how this is risk factor high. Let's put the scare tactic in there. But anyway, so I've been wearing this out for weeks, so it works really good. So this is fun. There's an IP geolocation script, which is pretty cool. Oh, whoops. This is not going to let me copy and paste it. Hold on. There we go. Let's do Adrian.
You're not my type.
Keep drinking that Everclear and I will be. So this is kind of cool. I mean, I don't know how much social engineering you all do, but I like it. So basically, you can run the script against any domain, like that. Oh, maybe I'm not connected to the internet. Anyway, it worked a little bit.
Are you connected to which wireless network?
I'm not. I'm on my own. From my own internet, so I don't trust you.
I wouldn't
So for some reason, some of the plugins aren't working, but you can see that it does give you latitude and longitude. So like you can see here that I actually did it for my website, which is actually hosted here in Louisville, Kentucky at our house. But anyway, so latitude, longitude, if anybody wants to come kill me. Anyway, so it's cool though for social engineering. I mean, there's a lot of useful things for this. Tracking down attackers, like looking through your SIM and trying to figure out where they are. The cool thing about this is you can, like if you, for example, are tasked with looking up every offending IP in your SIM or whatever, you can easily script something like this into a little bit of bash to geolocate every IP, and then you don't have to spend all day looking every one of them up. Yes?
The information for location, is it pulling that out? Who is, or what is it pulling that out of?
It comes from...
NextMine.
Tells you where...
NextMine.
Is it NextMine?
NextMine.
It tells you where it comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, so NextMine.
I use that for a lot of, you can just use a binary to use that to another stuff.
Right, I mean, it's not super difficult or anything like, I just like it because it's scriptable, right? So if I want to do it real quick, is the main thing. Oops, God, why do I keep doing that?
And you've got the power to do it with one.
All right, finally at the end of the scripts thing. So more scripts. I'll just go over these really quick. There's database ones. So DB2. DB2 is important because it's IBM2 database. Has anyone ever had the DB2 admin default password? Dude, it sucks. So what happened is IBM created a backdoor so that their technicians could work on the databases. So basically, like when you installed the IBM2 database, it added an admin Windows user for you, and it didn't tell you about it. So then when the technicians could come in, they could log right in and fix the databases, and they didn't have to ask you for help. So that was pretty awesome. You don't find that much anymore, but sometimes. Oracle.
There's a whole family of routers.
What's that?
There's a whole family of routers that has a backdoor that
Yeah.
you get to.
Oh, there's lots of vendors. Yeah, vendors are notorious for backdoors. Oracle, Citrix. The reason that we love Citrix is people deploy it all the time on the internet without two-factor authentication. So I send them an email, I get them to log into some mythical portal. Now I got some credentials. Then I find their Citrix site. They only have single-factor authentication. Then I'll log in. Now I'm on the VPN, and you know what happens after that. So SQL. MySQL, I mean, and you'll notice, see, I'm just using text files from every single port here. So it takes a little bit of a while to create, but it's much more effective, and it's much faster. You can also look for Nmap, POP3, VNC, which I love. So there's a script for the real VNC auth bypass. Everyone remember that? VNC 4.1 had authentication bypass. That was pretty awesome. X11, you barely ever see that anymore, but I only put this in here because I did find it somewhere like a few months ago, and I was like, holy hell. So anyway, and then Finger. I mean, Finger's pretty stupid, but you can enumerate users that way. All right, cool. So custom scripts. So you want to add custom scripts. And I talked about this a little bit, but basically it's really easy to write these.
You're giving me your slides later, right?
What?
You're giving me your slides later?
Yeah, why?
Okay.
Am I going too fast?
No, it's fine. No, with the blue, you can't really see it.
Sorry.
That's okay. We still,
Did I mention I suck at PowerPoint?
we still love you.
Anyway, basically I got a couple of links up here where I just found some out on the internet. We're actually going to look at this super dope script that Spider Labs, my friend Ryan Lynn, created. And so basically you could get on GitHub and search Nmap scripts, NSE, or any combination of those terms, and you'll find scripts for all kinds of stuff. It's not just for pen testing. They're for network tasks, auditing, freaking anything. And so if you get into it, I mean, when your boss tells you to do something and automate it, and you write a fucking Nmap script, you're going to look like a baller. Or so I've been told. All right, so let's talk about how to add a script, right? I don't know if anybody can even see this, but like I said, I'm going to make the slides available to Adrian after the whatever class. So basically, my friend Ryan wrote this awesome script. What he wanted to do was he was doing web app pen testing, and so an organization would give him like, 10,000 IPs, and they would have like a couple hundred or a couple thousand SSL ports open. And instead of going to every single one of them to figure out which ones he was interested in, he thought that he would write an Nmap script to sort of speed up the process, right? Because you don't want to look at any ISS welcome pages or anything like that. You really want to be able to look at only the web services so that you can concentrate on those. So his idea was, what if I wrote an Nmap script and it went to every single port 80 or 443 and it took a screenshot and then it moved on to the next one and then it kept them all in a directory so that I could look at it later. So in order to do that, you need this tool. I don't even know how you are supposed to even say that, but like, I guess it's WK-HTML Top VF, fuck, I don't know. But anyway,
HTML to PDF. HTML to
Oh, HTML. See, y'all are smarter than me. I don't know. Okay, so basically you need this tool. It's just a binary, and this is the main reason that this script was never included in the Nmap scripts, is because it uses an outside binary. So basically, you just grab that binary, you put it in your USR local bin. If you have Kali, I believe it's in there by default. But anyway, oh, whoops. Well, I was going to do it, but
Yeah, it's on there.
Okay, so it's on there, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So,
It's an image, PDF image.
so the next thing, the only thing that you would need to do is like, once you download this script, you would just need to make sure that the path, so it's coded for the 32-bit version script that we just looked at, so the binary is called, where was it? I was in USR local bin, right?
WK.
Call it's a user bin.
Oh, I wasn't in USR local.
There's WK HTML to image.
There it is.
WK HTML to PDF.
Yeah, so basically all you got to do is make sure in the beginning of the script that we're getting ready to look at, you just got to make sure that the path is right. So like, anyway, so you basically do a git clone on SpiderLab's repository. They act like there's a bunch, but it's the only Nmap script in there. It's called HTTP screenshots. And then, remember we were talking about every time you add a script, you have to update the database in order to get it to work. And then, oops. Here's how it looks like when it runs. So basically you would give it a -A, which is the aggressive. Remember, it runs all of the SC scripts already. Then you give it the HTTP screenshot /24, and basically what'll happen is it'll scan everything, and then you'll see every time for port 80 or port 443, it will say HTTP screenshot, and it will say saved a screenshot with the IP, the port, and a PNG. So now you can go look through all of those and focus your attention on important web things, I guess. All right, so does anybody have any questions about any of that stuff? Anything that I blew over too quick, didn't cover, talk more about? Anything? I'm sorry, I'm trying to hurry. I know we got to be out of here at a certain time. So
we're good for a while.
Got about an hour and 15 minutes, I think.
Oh, maybe I better slow down. Anyway, I mean, I got what I got. That's it. Sorry. So, Metasploit integration. So, importing, working with Nmap scans in Metasploit, and then using Nmap from inside the framework. So, who doesn't know how to get their Metasploit database going? All right, cool. So, this will lead into the Metasploit class I guess we're going to do someday. So basically, the services don't come started on Kali, so there's two things that you got to start. The service, you got to spell too, PostgreSQL. Dude, I can't do it.
I can't do it even when
I
people
can't
are
do it for
watching.
all these people. Fuck. That's why I had screenshots.
Are you having typing dysfunction because of anxiety?
I am. Probably hot. Oh,
Woohoo!
host. There we go. All right. So the first thing you got to do is start the database, and then the next thing you got to do is just start Metasploit. It's not really rocket scientist, but all right. So then console. So there's a really cool thing about Metasploit is that it's got a database. And so basically, like, once you get to the Metasploit part, in order to target your results a little bit better, you can import, you can either import files into the framework from Nmap, or you can run Nmap straight from the console. You can actually do it two different ways. You can run Nmap like this. So you can do it like that, and it doesn't, I don't even know what I'm scanning, but, so it doesn't, if you do it like this, it just runs Nmap, right? If you do it like this, and we'll talk about this in a sec, it runs the database Nmap command, and it actually saves it to the Metasploit database to begin with. But before we get to all that, so, oh yeah, real quick, if you want to make sure that you actually successfully did this correctly, you would just do database status, and it will tell you MSF3 is the default database. And so, like, obviously if you're working, you want to create some new ones without default passwords and stuff, but that is the default one that comes with Kali. So now that we're all connected, we're good. So, I know this is kind of blurring into Metasploit, but so if anybody doesn't care about Metasploit, you'll have to listen, I guess. But so here's a crash course in the database, basically. The important commands here that we're going to talk about are database import, database nmap, we want the database status, and then these commands here at the bottom, host, loop, services. Hosts and services are really the two that we're totally interested in for this particular talk. If we ever do a class about Metasploit, we'll probably go into all of these sort of in masterly detail. But the main thing that we're looking at right now is we want to get our information from Nmap into Metasploit. Because although Nmap does have some vulnerability stuff, like I don't use them unless I have to. I still use Metasploit. I'm a diehard Metasploit fan. Sorry. Oops. So, you have to import the Nmap XML files. So, I was scared to type in front of everybody, so I got screenshots. So basically, you do a database import of the XML file. It's not rocket scientist. It's super easy. And then importing, it will say successfully imported, right? So then, once you do that, you can issue the hosts command. And so you'll see, I don't think I had that many. Whoops. Oh. All right, so you'll see that once you enter all that information in the database, you come up with quite a bit of information, right? It comes up with the address, whatever information it gained from your Nmap file. So, the next thing you want to do is check out your targets, right? So, if you give hosts the host command, it will tell you every single thing. Remember when Jeremy was talking about it's better to just, or Adrian, I don't remember, they were saying it's better just to have all of the data that you collected in the Nmap file. Well, it is, because you can filter by it, so it doesn't matter if you have hosts in there that didn't respond to ping or whatever. So you just give it the host u command, and it will only tell you hosts that were responding. So, anyway, there we go. You can see it doesn't know a lot of these services, whatever, but it does know a lot too. All right, so it's not real hard. I mean, whoops. You can also, so that's the hosts, and I'll show some more commands on that, but basically what we're more interested in is the services, right? And so this is how you get the services up. You give it the services command, the port that you're interested in, and then once again, you to only grab the host that actually responded. So now, well, we've got all of the Windows hosts, right? Because, yes, sir.
So all of the stuff that you're doing, you're basically telling Metasploit, this is what I'm going to be looking at, these are the things I'm going to try to exploit, and then you actually end up running it? Is that?
Yeah, I'm getting to that part.
So I'm just asking though, like when you do the services minus P445 minus U, you're programming, these are the hosts with this particular port that I'm going to use for exploitation.
So not yet with this command, but that is what we're getting to.
So that's just showing it.
At this point, I'm just looking, right? I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do, right? So good lead into my next slide. Let's do something useful with all that crap we just talked about, right? So what you do is you give it the -R command. So does everybody know how to set R hosts in Metasploit, right? So in Metasploit, basically there's a variable. Basically it's like a menu-driven tool, and then you set a variable for people you're going to attack. R host is the remote hosts. So like an R host would be a single, hold on, let me see if I can get to something. I'll give us an example here. All right, so basically, like what this is an SMB login scanner, which is basically just going to try Windows credentials on every machine, right? So I've broken into the organization. I looked on the bottom of Adrian's keyboard, and he had his username and his password on a Post-it note because that's where he always keeps it. And then I decide that I'm going to see where all else Adrian can log into in the environment, right? So what I need is R hosts, right? So these are the remote hosts that I'm going to go for, right? So normally I would put in like, whatever was in the organization, right? 192.168.1.0/24 or whatever the IP address is. However, if I was doing it this way, oops. So if I was doing it this way, basically I've searched for services, I've searched for everything with port 445 open, right? So that's all my Windows machines that are in my database. And then when I give it the -R command, it's going to automatically set every single one of those hosts as my R hosts file. So now they are programmed in there to work. So now, as soon as I run, now when I run this command, I no longer have to set the R host variable because it's already set for me globally until I unset it. So I can use that specific set of IPs for multiple scanners and exploits and whatever for the rest of the day or whatever, however long, until you set it to something else, right? So like basically, this is where workflow comes in, right? You would set all of your Windows hosts and then you would run all of your Windows scans and exploits. Then you would get rid of that and you would probably run all of your Linux type stuff, SSH, whatever. But so another reason that I use individual files for every port because it keeps all that stuff really separate. You can also use, hopefully I don't have any client names in here. Oh, whoops. Walkspace. So
he's being testing a Chinese restaurant.
So you can also set, what's cool about Metasploit is that you don't have to create a separate database for every client because that would suck, right? So basically it has workspaces. So I didn't want to show you all my client names, so I'm just using like a default instance or whatever. But basically what I would do is I would create a new workspace for every client. So you do -H, surprisingly enough, help. So basically that gives you all the workspace commands, so you can add a workspace, delete a workspace, rename it, blah, blah, blah. So basically you would have a workspace for every client, day, month, I don't know, whatever you want to do, but, and then you just switch between the workspaces, and that's how, so like, I would set like a workspace for Linux, a workspace for Windows, whatever, or a workspace for client, however you want to do it, but that's how workspaces work. So cool, so now we got our R host variable set up. So then, basically this is sort of what I just showed you, but now I can go to one of my Metasploit tools that actually uses SMB. So like I'm at SMB and new users, which basically all it does is enumerate Windows users. It's not very exciting. However, I just put this up there so you can see now my rhost variable is pre-set up for me with a file. And so it's going to use those Windows hosts for everything that I use Metasploit on. All right, so that's cool, but sometimes I'm too lazy to do all that file importing nonsense. So basically, you can run Nmap from straight inside the console. Like I said, if you run Nmap by itself, it just works like normal. If you preface it with the db_Nmap, and you can still give it the same flags, evasion, scripts, like all of that nonsense, like ports, all of that stuff, and you'll see that it will auto add this stuff to the database. So this is useful for multiple reasons. One, if you're lazy, but two, if you already did a big import of your whole Nmap file, but then you get like a couple of more hosts you want to look a little bit more closer at, you could just do it like this and it would auto add this stuff to the same database, as long as you're in the same workspace. Cool? Cool. Oh, and this is, if anybody tries to run this MS0867 check, they did disable it because they thought it was unsafe or something, but now you gotta give it, see how it says script arguments unsafe 1? So basically there's a lot of checks like the denial of service and a couple other ones that they make you pass that parameter to it to get it to run. It's kind of like what Windows says, are you sure? This is Nmap's way of saying, are you sure you actually want to run this dummy? If you do, you got to put unsafe okay, basically. So if your script ever doesn't run and it's something like that, it's because of the unsafe 1 thing. All of the commands in Metasploit have help. So here's the help for the host command. There's all kinds of different things. So when you look at the nmap host command, it's set up just like a database, right? It's Postgres. And so these are all the columns that are available in the database. So it will tell you all kinds of stuff. It keeps count of how many times you try to exploit it, MAC address, name, OS flavor, OS language, whatever data it can get, it adds it to the database. So basically, like when you do host-c, then you only give it the columns that you want. It's just like doing a select statement in the database. I mean, that's not anything new and fancy, but they just try to make it easier for people that are SQL challenged. Same deal with the services command, basically similar. It doesn't have quite as many columns, not quite as cool, but it does have, protocol, service name, all that kind of stuff. And you can also, what I like is you can add and delete stuff if you want to. Like if you don't like it, it's clogging up your database, doesn't look cool or whatever, you can get rid of it. Here's a couple of example queries. I'm just going to blow over these real quick. Put some time out. I might spend a lot of time on them. So these are just some examples that ways that you can query the database, right? Hosts and services. You give it the -c, and then you give it the columns that you're interested in, right? So in the first one, I'm only interested in the address and the kind of OS. In the second one, I want the address, the kind of OS, and only Linux. Address, OS, only Linux, and then the -r, remember, is to set that as my remote host file. So I would do that once I determined what Linux machines I was going to attack. You can filter just by single IP, name, info, so if I'm only looking for that one particular IP address, then you can go to services, info, name, port. I mean, it's all pretty self-explanatory, but that's just to show you that you can search for pretty much anything in the database. And so this is 100 times easier than scrolling through some 10-mile Nmap file, I promise. Because if you start scanning /16s and stuff with Nmap, the files get ridiculously large. I mean, I'll just show you one, for example. So hopefully I took the client name out of this. So here's one, for example. Oh, good, I did. So here's what a grepable file looks like. I know they showed you a little bit, but see how it's all in one line? Like, see how this can go on for fucking ever. So, anyway, so like, basically, like, it's a lot easier to import that into the database and make queries from it. Which is why I like it. Is that rain?
Yeah.
Sorry. Hope everybody likes each other. We might be here for a while. Alright, so the last thing is, this is all cool, but how do I export all this fancy information that I just got? So basically you can export any of the stuff in a Metasploit database to a CSV file. So for example, I can make my query, I only want HTTPs. You know, I only want the port column, and I only want this IP address. So basically, and then I output that to http.csv, right? So there's a couple of different options there. I mean, you can literally like do anything, and then this is what it looks like, standard CSV file, blah, blah, blah. But you can get a lot of the information back out of the database that way to provide to your client, to show how many machines you exploited, to show whatever. Alright. So, Evasion. So, I talked a little bit about this, a little bit, but I'm going to go over it a little bit more, just in case anybody didn't get it the first 10 times. So, SynScan. So, this is basically, they say the Xmas scan is the best, but in my experience, that stupid Xmas scan only works against Linux. It doesn't work at all against Windows. So, like, the SynScan is still basically the most stealthy scan that you can do if you have to do a scan. So, you probably should have listened to Adrian and them better if you don't know what that is yet. So, I almost always do a SynScan. Here I talked about this a little bit more, source port manipulation. This is the same as we were talking about with the DNS. So FTP can also be used for source port manipulation in conjunction with that FTP bounce attack. So once you find something with the FTP bounce attack, then you can spoof the source port, obviously as FTP, because we're bouncing off an FTP server, and then you can use that as a decoy, right? And hopefully fool somebody, I don't know. But, so when I'm internal, I love to use Kerberos port 88 because that's the most allowed thing on an internal network, in my opinion. So DNS, I like to use 53 externally, and Kerberos internally, I like to use 88. My second favorite is DHCP because, I mean, that's harmless, right? Everybody lets that through. So, anyway, so those are the things that I like to. There are a couple of scans that it does not work for. So, operations that use normal operating sockets, DNS requests, full TCP connect scans, the OS version detection, and the script scanning don't always work for source port. The script scanning, I'm a little bit, I've had mixed luck. Some it works and some it doesn't. So I'll put it in there anyway, just for good measure. So, fragmentation. So Adrian talked about this a little bit, but this is basically a really good way to hide yourself from IDSs and IPSs. So basically, it splits up the packets so that you can. So for example, like I was talking about Nmap signatures or whatever. So if you have a 20-byte TCP header, you can split that up into 3 packets, 2 with 8 bytes each and 1 with 4. So it would basically send it in fragmented packets. You can also specify F again. It's kind of like verbose. The more times you specify the V, you can keep specifying F, and it will break it back into multiples. So it'll do 16 bytes per fragment the next time, and so on and so forth. You can also specify your own MTU option. It has to be a multiple of 8. If you don't understand it, it won't work. So I usually stick with the fragmentation thing. Anyway, so there are some scans that this is not supported for. Like I said, this is the type of stuff that you generally use to like create your host lists and that kind of thing, or I do. Sorry. Scan delay. So we saw a couple examples of scan delay in some of my commands in the beginning. I really like to use scan delay on external scans. It's not as useful internally because people are nowhere near as robust at monitoring their internal network as they are their external network. But usually when I do like a big giant scan on an external network, I set a scan delay of 3 seconds. That can be an excruciatingly long time, but at the end of the engagement, when they say they didn't detect me, I feel better about it. It was time well spent. So basically, like most IDSs and IPSs have a threshold for various things. All of them have different thresholds. Like I said, some check for 5 IPs, some check for IPs in sequence, some check for a number of packets per second. I mean, they're all different. So this is just another way that you can get around them. Now, a networking thing that you can be done is there's also a flag called max scan delay, which have you ever had Nmap like hung up for a long time, like Adrian's was when he was doing that scan? So if you would have set a max scan delay for a networking task of 1 second, 3 seconds, whatever, it would have told Nmap to give up after that amount of time, and it just would have moved on, and we wouldn't have been looking at the grass grow. So I talked about this a little bit more, IP list randomization. This is super, super, super important. Nmap does have a flag for this called randomized hosts. Like I said, I'm sort of old school. I like to use the shell, so I like to shuffle my list with sort R before I send it into Nmap. Nothing against Nmap, I'm sure it works awesome. But that's just the way that I learned how to do it. The other problem with randomized hosts is it does have a limit. So if you're scanning more than 16,384 hosts, it will not work. I don't know where that number came from, but that's what it says in the book.
It always comes from math.
I'm sure there's some math there somewhere, but whatever. So anyway, so like I said, I like to use the sort R. This is super, super important is IP list randomization. So I use this pretty much on any scan that I do. Anytime. Oh, God, I keep doing that. So decoy scanning, I know Adrian touched on this a little bit, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but basically there's 2 different kinds of scan. There's an idle scan, which uses zombie hosts, and then there's a decoy scan. So they're a little bit different. The idle scan is pretty complicated, so I didn't make a slide for that one, but I mean the zombie, yeah. So, but the decoy scanning, basically all it has to do is have the host up, right? And then you can make it look like you're scanning from those hosts. So this does fool some stuff. Basically, the trick to any of these IPS evasion techniques is that none of them are foolproof, right? You have to do a combination of them in varying degrees to get the thing that you need. Obviously, decoy scanning can be defeated through router path tracing and stuff like that. So, but I've had pretty good luck with decoy scanning.
Yeah, also, if you really look at the packets being sent, you can kind of tell it's not decoy because the ones you're actually talking back to, doing kind of version detection, the one you're actually talking back to is the one that's really connecting. And also, if you get reset packets, it seems to, it can fake the reset. Well, I guess it'd be hard to do that, but it doesn't.
I don't think it can fake the, it fakes anything that's being sent, but the receiving packets.
Yeah, but it doesn't speak all the same stuff.
Right.
So you can tell if you look real carefully which one's the real one connecting to you.
And just a stupid fact, but you do have to use IP addresses instead of domain names for this to work.
By the way, it's 2 to the 14.
It's what?
2 to the 14.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, so this was like sort of what that gentleman was asking me. So Nmap does have a signature to its packets. So basically its default data length is 40 bytes and the ICMP echo requests are 28. So that's unique to Nmap the way that I understand it. So that's how a lot of IDSs and IPSs fingerprint Nmap net traffic on the network. Basically you can add data length, right? So basically it just appends a bunch of random patty data. Does anyone do assembly know what NOPs are? It basically adds a bunch of NOPs data to the end of the packet to make it look more legitimate and less like a scan packet, because scan packets are really trimmed down, right? Because they're only designed to do what they're supposed to do. So if you add a bunch of crap on there, you can make it look like true Windows packet or something like that. So anyway, that's how you use that. The one thing I don't know, I always use this number in multiples of 8 just because that's usually common, but I don't know, I couldn't find anything about what the number had to be, so I don't know if it just adds them exponentially or what. But this can slow down your scan too, right? Because if your packets become ginormous, obviously your scan's going to slow down. So a couple more evasion techniques. Though, I mean, if you're truly trying to be evasive, the less scans, the better, right? Break them up, right? I know it's really cool to go in there and go /16, go, and then go to lunch and come back and it's all done. But that's just not the way it works on a pen test, right? So you might be there all day scanning port by port. So I like to break mine up into chunks, ports of interest, right? What else? 445 is my favorite, 389, LDAP, 8080 is always good for Tomcat, JMX console.
Come up with a list of how you want to do it, just to make a script.
Yeah, I
just have a rest for a certain thing.
Exactly. So I do have that, right? And so basically I have a script that does that, and then one of the variables that I set in there is the scan delay. I basically set all these, it's all scripted out, and then I set all of these things as variables. These are the ones that I care about. So absolutely that can be done, for sure.
Then we can still go get lunch.
You could still get lunch.
That's important.
Didn't you actually have more time?
Exactly.
You never want to get done too fast, though. It's never good. You always want to get done Thursday and take Friday off. So I'm always done on Thursday, no matter what. So, like I said, most IDS, IPS, in my experience, alert on more than 5 ports. So keep your scans under 5 ports. Layer them with obfuscation techniques, all the stuff that I just talked about. And then also, keeping your scan time to a minimum. That's what we just talked about, or breaking them into multiple jobs. I guess that's all I got. These are all the people that I ripped off stuff from their site because I was doing it. Most of these people are my friends, so it's okay. I just want to make sure they give them credit. I did take a lot of stuff from a lot of people's sites last night. And that's all I got. Does anybody have any questions about any of this stuff? All right, cool. I guess we're done kind of early. I went fast. But so if we want to work on labs, if anybody wants any help with any of this stuff, I'm happy to help them out.
Hey, Mark, I would like to point out something. You had Lee Baird's website up there?
Yeah.
Lee Baird has a lot of really good scripts to automate a lot of Nmap processes. And one of the best ones that I've seen him do a presentation was actually at AID last year, which long-haired hippie freak up there recorded. So, was it last year or the year before?
I don't know. I haven't been to AID in a few years. But yeah, so a lot of those, Lee Baird has a script called Discover, and so me and another guy work with Eric, use a different version of his script. He's improved it since then. We liked the older version better, but he has a great script, and the website's on there. I mean, if anybody wants to go there and check it out, it's right here. It doesn't have any evasion techniques at all, but it basically does all of that script stuff that we talked about. He has it all, follows the same method that we just talked about. He does a complete ping scan, then he splits everything up into ports, and then he does individual script scan against each ports. The only problem is that with it is that it's in bash, so it's not multi-threaded or anything. So to do it on anything more than a /24 can be excruciatingly painful. But at some point we're looking at rewriting that in Ruby with him and making it multi-threaded if possible. Because we love the script, it's awesome. It's just that it's not conducive to large-scale networks. But it is awesome for, what I use that type of thing for is as soon as I look in my etcresolve.conf and I get a server range, I immediately run a script like that, like against the server range or something like that. Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.